Namaste. Hello and welcome to the Kundalini podcast. That was Zen. This is Tao. I'm Vivek Govekar. Today I'm going to talk about some heavy subjects. I'm going to do some heavy lifting. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it justice in these like 14 minutes that I assign for each video, but I'm going to attempt it. So I'll make up for whatever I've left behind later on. I'm going to put some links to some blogs and some articles. But these are complex topics. So if I make a mistake or if I don't explain it well or confuse you even more, my apologies in advance. What am I going to talk about that is so complex? I'm going to talk about Samsara, Nirvana, Maya. Okay, these are just words from Buddhism, ancient Hindu texts, and philosophies in general, Kashmir Shaivism. So, what do they mean? Let me start with an explanation of the words. Samsara is your mundane life. Now, in the language that I speak, Marathi, which is kind of a diluted form of Sanskrit, samsar is how it's called. And that just means a person who has a household, has a wife, has a child, and functions in that reality, in that realm. So that's samsara, in general, this mundane practical world. Nirvana is a freedom from bondage, a freedom from your bindings that keep you in everyday reality. And Maya is illusion. And that's what I'm going to dwell on is a couple of these concepts as they have been explained rather, in different traditions, in different philosophies. So let me start with what is called Hinayana Buddhism. And other philosophies, other Upanishads, I just recently read the Aruni Upanishad, which says sannyas, which is renunciation, going away. So you are either a samsari, who lives in samsara, that means takes care of your household duties and functions in society, or you're a sannyasi, that is, you have renounced everything, live on very little sustenance, and you don't own any possessions, you live in a cave or isolated from society. And that's how you attempt to gain nirvana. Now, Mahayana Buddhism says that samsara is nirvana. There was a great philosopher called Nagarjuna. And what he said was, you don't need to go out. You don't need to become a sannyasi to remove bondage. And in my own experience, why I'm talking about all of this is ultimately I'm going to tie it to my experience. I can only talk about what I have gone through. So, in my experience, you can remain a householder even during a Kundalini awakening, even when you have reached the final stage. Remember, these yogis, these renunciants are going out in an attempt to awaken their Kundalini, in an attempt to reach that final stage of Nirvana. Okay? So, in my case, or in the case of other people that have spontaneous awakenings, you're kind of already successful at a certain stage, up to a certain stage. And now you're wondering, well, does it mean I have to dwell in isolation? Do I have to renounce my duties and obligations as a householder? Right? I struggled with this for about 3 or 4 years. Also, you struggle with this concept of Maya. Because as I have mentioned before, in the initial stages, in the first few hours, first few months, first couple of years, I was in a completely different state of mind and in a different realm, psychologically speaking, which you can compare to that state of nirvana, that state of removal of bondage or ascending to heaven. But the Kundalini process is such, you will read this on the Biology of Kundalini website, that you have to come down. And there's a big letdown after that. And you feel that craving, I want to go back to wherever that state was. And why isn't that permanent? So you struggle with the concept of Maya as well. Because now you have had the gnosis that this is all illusory. But you're stuck. The body is still stuck. and you have to live out this life. In Kashmir Shaivism, Swami Lakshmanju mentions three states of a Kundalini awakening, three types of Kundalini awakenings. Some people who are at a later stage of development, they have had many lifetimes, and in the last few lifetimes, the Kundalini has awakened, done some work, and this is their last lifetime. So that person awakens their Kundalini. The process is finished, and immediately that person leaves the body. So, to the average outsider, it looks like that person has died. But to ascend, eventually, beyond a certain level, you drop the physical appearance and you have ascended to a higher plane with the spirit, with the soul. Then there are lower forms of a Kundalini awakening, which it takes longer. Second form, it takes a little bit longer. Third form, which I think me or most of these people with spontaneous awakenings are going through, takes the longest. So you have to live out a lifetime. And you are waking up in this reality every single day. Night follows day, and that cosmic temporal causality, as it's called, time passes, and you see a sequence of events. Now, why is this important? Because Maya, as a principle, has been expressed differently in different philosophies. You take the Vedantic explanation of Maya. So they both call it an illusion. Maya is a form of illusion that keeps you separated from absolute reality or absolute truth. What is called Param Artha. Again, different terms. Instead of Samsara and Nirvana, you have Param Artha, which is highest absolute truth, and Vyavahara. Vyavahara is your everyday mundane reality, like Samsara. So in Vedanta, Maya has been explained as a force that keeps you bound, keeps you in that illusory state where now you only see this limited illusory reality. Okay? But that leaves a lot of questions unanswered. Again, you have to go in detail and read these differences. I've posted it in response to another video in the comments section, but I'll post it again. Kashmir Shaivism explains Maya as a principle on its own. It has its own reality. And it is a principle that operates on the consciousness, on this unbound absolute consciousness, the consciousness of the totality, Brahman, Shiva, as the universe, to give it a bound form by these so-called kanchukas. Kanchuka is a sheath or a covering. So there are 5 kanchukas. These are contractions. It contracts the absolute into an individual, into a limited form. And that is the Maya principle in operation in Kashmir Shaivism. So that means the more you meditate, the more you get into higher states of consciousness, the more you are likely to transcend these contractions. So one of these kanchukas is Kala. Kala is time. Since I mentioned time as a temporal causality. There is no such thing as time in a sequential manner outside of this physical reality. The ultimate consciousness, Shiva, Brahman, whatever you want to call it, is unbound by time. It was never born, it will never die, and time as a concept itself is not a limitation for it. But once you take a limitation, contraction, and put it on this individual soul, then time becomes a contraction. You were born in the past, you are moving towards the future, and with every passing day, that sequence of events unfolds. And you seem bound by all of those things. But now here's the concept of samsara being nirvana. If you are in that initial stage of ecstasy, euphoria, when you first awaken your kundalini, and now you're like, why am I stuck in this physical reality? The escape out of the physical reality is not by bypassing any of your functions. You still have to perform every one of these functions, and ironically, by doing them better. Which is why I talk about making everything into a meditation. which is why I talk about integral yoga. What's the attempt here? The attempt is that you're doing 20 minutes of meditation twice a day, let's say. Then you bring that into the outside reality as mindful awareness. You are going from action to action without carrying any thoughts from the past action into the next action. You're as empty as possible and just performing these functions. Why is all of this being attempted? So that you can have the most limited amount of attachment to each of these functions. That's the practice you're trying to inculcate, imbibe inside you. And as you go along this path and you're doing more and more of it while doing your average things, no need for renunciation, no need to become a sannyasi, no need to go into a cave. Do it in your everyday functions, and everything becomes your meditation. But once removed from that, you are in the present moment, you move to the next action, and you're only in that action. You're doing it to the best of your ability, right? So now, if you're washing dishes, you're just involved in doing it the best way you can. You move from that, you go out and tend to your garden, you are completely engrossed in that. And more you get involved in only that and focused on that, the easier it becomes to detach yourself from those actions. In fact, if you're doing it badly, if you're just doing a poor job of doing it, you're actually involved in many other thoughts. You're doing that halfway somehow, but your thoughts are somewhere else. You're not focused. So you're stuck more and more in this physical reality. But the more you do it with complete focus, complete concentration, the more of your senses are withdrawn. Pratyahara, which is what Raja Yoga talks about. So, samsara is nirvana. The more engrossed you are in an action, but the more detached you are, giving the fruits of your actions to the Almighty. The more you remember mindfulness in every action and detach yourself, the easier it is to transcend that contraction. Those five kanchukas that Kashmir Shaivism mentions. So that is the Maya principle. No, Maya doesn't mean that you are somehow going to suddenly stop seeing physical reality. No, you still have to live out this lifetime. But within each moment of this lifetime is that unbounded reality hidden within. It's a process of going within. So, as I've said, this is a complex topic, and I'm just cramming a lot of stuff in one video so that you can go and read the other stuff that I'm going to put in the comment section. And that would explain more of it. Instead of trying to bypass your duties, your functions in this world, go deeper within into those functions. And that's why these methods are put in place: Raja Yoga, integral yoga, meditation. You're questioning everything, but not questioning in a intellectual way. You're witnessing so that you're looking, okay, if there is thoughts going on, the cycle of thoughts, who is doing the thinking? Oh, the machine, the mind. And yourself witnesses that. So that awareness, that focus on your actions is a necessity. So is detachment. So is giving your everything to each action, but not having an expectation of an outcome, not being perturbed by any outcome, just reacting, responding to each action as it comes along, doing your best, and giving it all to the Almighty. And being in that state as often as possible. And then eventually, the meditation or samadhi that you experience in your quiet time, isolated time, is brought into every action. And like Osho says, or other great philosophers and spiritual people say, your samadhi remains unbroken. You are always in samadhi, whether you're doing some action or you're sitting quietly. And that's what it means by samsara is nirvana. Hope that was helpful. Thank you. Be well.